If these videos help you unwind, take a moment to like and subscribe. It really supports the channel. And I'd love to know, where in the world are you listening from, and what time is it for you right now? Drop it in the comments below. Now, get comfortable, close your eyes if you'd like, because it's time for tonight's story. This is a true-to-life story of solitude, surveillance, and the feeling of being watched long before you realize you're not alone. I wanted to be alone, not in the sad, self-destructive way. I just needed to reset. I'd burned out in every way you could. Work, family, relationship, social battery, all gone. So I did what everyone threatens to do but never commits to. I unplugged, booked a cabin in the mountains of Montana for a full month. No Wi-Fi, no cell signal, just firewood, a generator, a hand-crank radio, and the kind of silence I could feel in my bones. The place wasn't fancy, but it was real, off-grid, rented through a site that barely had a working payment system. I had to wire cash to the ownersome old guy named Carl, who never answered the phone. The GPS coordinates were sent on a physical map with a note that read, "You'll know it when you smell pine." I found it at dusk, just off a game trail past a dried-up creek. A-frame, single-story, solar panels half covered in moss. It looked abandoned, but wasn't. The key was under a stack of firewood. Inside was everything I needed: a cot, a potbelly stove, a water pump that smelled like iron, and a journal on the table with the words, "Use this if you want. Helps pass time." I laughed, tossed my bag down, slept like a corpse. The first 2 days were perfect. No noise but birds and bugs. I spent most of my time hiking, gathering wood, reading, staring into the trees. At night, I built fires, wrote in the journal a little. I didn't even miss my phone. It was the quietest my brain had been in years. Then came the third night. I woke up around 3 a.m. No sound, just a weird sensation, like someone had tapped me on the forehead in a dream. I sat up, checked the stove fire, was low but alive. I pulled on a jacket and stepped outside to pee. That's when I saw it. A rock placed carefully on the center of the porch rail. Rounded, smooth, speckled gray. One of the dozen I'd collected earlier that day from the creek to ring the fire pit. I know I didn't leave it there. I brought all the rocks back in a mesh bag, counted them, used 11. This one was the 12th. I stared at it for too long, then shook it off. Told myself a raccoon or squirrel dragged it up, even though I knew how ridiculous that sounded. Went back inside. Didn't sleep well. The next morning, the rock was gone. So was my fire starter. I kept it in a drawer with a flashlight, an emergency whistle. Not locked, but who was gonna steal from me? I searched everywhere, nothing. That night, I used a match to light the stove and went to bed early. At some point, I dreamed I was in the woods, kneeling in wet leaves, while something whispered right behind my ear, "You breathe loud." Woke up soaked in sweat. Cabin was freezing. I didn't light the fire. On day 5, I went to filter water and found that my pot had been moved. Not far, just a few feet from the rock circle, but placed upright on a log, like someone was trying to set it there gently. That night, I set up my phone to record a time lapse by the window. When I checked the footage the next morning, the video stopped at 2:43 a.m. Battery still full. File corrupted. On day 6, I found a note behind the mirror in the cabin, handwritten on paper I didn't bring. "You sleep too heavy." Folded neatly, no dust on it. Ink still wet enough to smear. I didn't sleep that night. Didn't eat either. I sat on the floor with the axe across my lap, staring at the door, waiting for footsteps that never came. On the 7th day, I left a note of my own. Just one word. Why? I placed it under a rock on the porch. That night, I heard the knock. One knock. Soft, like a fingernail against wood. I didn't move, didn't breathe, just stared at the door. And in the silence that followed, I heard breathing. Close, too close. Not outside, not above, not beneath. It was behind me. I didn't turn around right away. I couldn't. My whole body went cold, like my skin knew something my brain refused to accept. The breathing behind me was faint, steady, almost calm. It sounded closer than possible if no one was in the cabin. My back was against the wall, my eyes locked on the front door. The fire had died. The only light came from the dying embers, barely enough to cast shadows, but there was one. In the far corner of the room, across from the cot, a shadow that hadn't been there before, taller than the table, still, long. I blinked. Gone. The breathing stopped too. I waited. Minutes passed. The quiet got heavier. Eventually, I worked up the nerve to grab the flashlight and sweep the room. Nothing. No footprints, no signs of entry. Just me, the axe, and my shredded nerves. I didn't sleep. Not even after the sun rose. When daylight finally burned through the treetops, I stepped out and circled the cabin. No tracks, no scuff marks, no signs anyone had been there at all. I wanted to believe I imagined it. Sleep deprivation, paranoia, something. But then I saw the note I'd left under the rock. It was still there, still folded, but someone had written on the back. You know why. I packed. I wasn't stupid. I figured, fine, maybe this was just some backwoods freak messing with me. Some recluse who hated outsiders or got off on scaring hikers. But I wasn't sticking around to find out what happened next. I packed everything, grabbed the journal, and hiked back toward the trailhead. An hour in, I realized something was off. I didn't recognize the path. I should have passed a broken fence post and a creek bend by then. But the trail didn't match my notes, and the trees started to look too uniform, repeating almost, like I was walking in a loop I couldn't see. I tried GPS. Dead. Compass, spinning. I turned back. That's when I saw it. My own boot prints, leading straight back toward the cabin. I don't remember getting back inside. It's like I blinked and was sitting on the edge of the cot, unpacking my gear without thinking. Like I'd given up, or like something wanted me to give up. The journal was open to a new page. I didn't write it, but it was my handwriting. It's safer in the walls. I slammed it shut, nailed the windows closed with old rusted nails I found behind the stove. I checked every inch of the place walls, crawl space, attic, if you could even call it that. Nothing. But every now and then while I searched, I'd hear soft movement behind the walls, like someone dragging a bag of leaves through a tight space. Then silence, then breathing again. I left the lights on, slept with the axe again. Still didn't sleep. Day 9. There was a carving on the front door. 3 vertical lines, rough, gouged deep. Not knife marks, claw-like. I found a pile of small animal bones under the porch, arranged in a circle. In the trees, I spotted what looked like fabric hanging from a branch. I climbed up to check it out. It was my t-shirt, the one I slept in on my first night. I hadn't seen it in days, but it was tied into a noose hanging over the trail. That night, I heard it again. Movement behind the walls. Crawling, then a soft tap, tap, tap against the back of the mirror. When I shined my flashlight on it, the reflection wasn't right. It showed the room, but not me. It showed someone else standing where I was. Head tilted, mouth open, wearing my clothes. I should have smashed the mirror. I don't know why I didn't. I just stood there, flashlight aimed dead center, watching that thing in my reflection tilt its head further and further until the motion didn't look human anymore. My body wouldn't move. Not frozen, just resisting. Like part of me didn't want to scare it off. Like something deeper needed to know what it would do next. Then it blinked. That's what broke me. I spun and swung the axe. The mirror cracked down the middle. The glass shattered across the cabin floor. There was nothing behind it. No crawl space, no cavity, just insulation and old wood. I slept in the chair that night with my back to the door, axe in one hand, flashlight in the other. The batteries were low. Everything smelled like wet pine and metal. I thought I saw movement behind the firelight at least 4 times. It didn't come closer, just paced, waiting. The next morning, I woke to the sound of something dragging across the roof. Heavy, not claws, not footsteps. A pull, a scrape, like a bag full of wet sand being dragged from one end of the cabin to the other. I ran outside and looked up. Nothing there, but near the chimney, carved in the moss-covered shingles, were 3 words. Don't look up. I did anyway. Nothing. But later that day, while chopping wood, I found more of my clothing scattered in the woods. All of it cut into long strips, knotted together like rope. At least 30 feet of it, hanging from a branch about 20 feet up. Way too high for me to reach. Way too cleanly tied to be wind or weather. That night, I wrote in the journal again, for the first time in days. But when I opened it, all the pages had changed. Every entry I'd written gone, replaced by a single line, written over and over and over. You're not who came here. The floorboards creaked when I walked now. Not always, not everywhere only. When I stepped on certain spots. And I realized something. The creaking was responding. If I stepped twice, it would echo once. If I stopped, it would creak again, like something was matching my pace beneath the floor. I ripped up a board with the back of the axe. Underneath was dirt, old pipes, and the corner of a plastic bag. I reached in and pulled it up. Inside, a burner phone, dead, and a notebook soaked in water. The first page was smeared, but legible. If you find this, it means I didn't make it. The thing doesn't kill you. It replaces you. Page after page described things I was already experiencing. The rocks, the missing items, the breathing, the reflection, even the t-shirt noose. Then, the final page. Don't trust your own voice. If it speaks while your mouth is shut, run. That night, I set up a trap. I tied bells from my gear across the front and back doors. Slept light, no fire, total darkness. Around 2:14 a.m., the front bell chimed. Not loud, just once. Then the handle turned. Not fast, just tested. Then nothing. I didn't move. Then I heard my own voice, whispering from under the floorboards. Let me back in. I didn't move until daylight. Just sat there in the chair, gripping the axe, staring at the front door. The whispering stopped after about 10 minutes, but the silence that followed was worse. It wasn't empty. It was expectant, like something on the other side was waiting for my reaction, studying it. When I finally stood, my legs didn't work right. Too stiff, too cold. I hadn't noticed how numb I was until I stepped forward and nearly collapsed. I stayed upright, pried the back door open. The bell was still tied, unrung. The front bell, though, was on the ground, unhooked, rope neatly cut. It didn't break in. It undid the knot. That's when I knew this wasn't random. This wasn't some animal or drunk hermit messing with me. This was intentional, careful, human, or close enough to fake it. I found more footprints near the tree line. Not boots, bare feet, narrow, the toes long, almost too long. I followed them a few yards. They stopped abruptly mid-stride, like whatever made them just vanished or got pulled straight up. I tried the radio. The crank barely worked. Static on all frequencies. The generator was nearly out of fuel. I thought about hiking back down to the main road, but the map I'd marked was missing, gone from my pack. Every note I'd written was in their place. A single page in my handwriting. Stop leaving. That night, I didn't sleep. Not because I didn't want to, but because I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard it. My voice, repeating lines from past conversations, old memories, laughing, whistling. Then something new, crying, quiet, muffled, coming from behind the walls. I pressed my ear against the plaster and heard it clearer. It was me, begging, "Please, don't do this. Please, I want to go home. Please." I backed away, grabbed the axe again, and something inside me shifted. Not panic, not fear, anger. Whoever or whatever was doing this wasn't just watching. It was practicing. I set up the camera again, this time buried in the corner between crates facing the cot. When I reviewed the footage the next morning, I nearly threw up. At 2:32 a.m., something crawled out from behind the stove. Not walked crawled. on all fours, too fluid, too quiet. It stood slowly, stretched to its full height. Same build as me, same posture, same clothes. It walked to the cot, sat on the edge, and just stared at the camera for 7 full minutes. Then tilted its head and smiled, but not my smile, wider, off, like it had more muscle than bone. Then it mouthed something. I rewound the footage over and over. Eventually figured it out. Almost ready. I went outside. Needed air. Or maybe I needed to see the sky to feel real again. That's when I saw the second cabin. At least, I thought it was a cabin. Just past the tree line. Same shape. Same structure. Except it wasn't there before. I walked toward it. 20 steps in. It vanished. Just gone. No fog. No noise. Like blinking and forgetting what you were looking at. When I turned around, the original cabin looked different. The porch was shorter. The window was gone. The door had changed color. I ran back, heart hammering. Inside, everything was where I left it, except the journal. New page, new line. Pick which version you want to be. I didn't touch the journal. I stared at it for almost an hour, just sitting in the corner, back to the wall, axe in hand. The line on the page hadn't changed. Pick which version you want to be. I don't know how it knew the one thing I was afraid to admit, even to myself. I was starting to forget what I sounded like, what I looked like. After nearly 2 weeks alone, no mirror, no photos, no voice mimosi was drifting. And the imitation? It was getting sharper. That night, I didn't bother setting the bells. I wanted it to come in. I wanted to see what it would do if I invited it. The fire burned low. I kept all the lights off except for one lantern near the cot. At 3:12 a.m., it stepped into the cabin. Not from the door, not from under the floor, from the wall, like it peeled itself out of the wood. Same height, same clothes, same hands. But the eyes were wrong, too still, too glossy, like they were remembering how to blink. It didn't speak, just walked over and sat where I normally did. Picked up the axe, turned it in its hands, then looked at me, tilted its head, and smiled. I've been here longer than you. The voice wasn't exact, close, but like someone doing a good impression with bad lungs. Before you showed up, I had no mouth, no name, no shape. You gave me those. I didn't respond. My throat had gone dry. But I don't want to wear you anymore. I want to be you. You can go. I'll stay. It reached into its coat and pulled out something round, tossed it across the floor. I didn't want to look, but I did. My wallet, driver's license, cards, a photo I didn't remember bringing, a Polaroid of me standing on the porch. But the cabin in the background wasn't the one I recognized. Smaller, older, dead vines crawling across the frame. I looked back at the imitation. It was already standing, already moving to the mirror, the cracked one I'd smashed. But now, it was whole again. It raised the axe and placed the blade gently against the glass. Say yes, and I'll take the memory, the name, the pain. You can forget, you can go. I ran. Out the door, into the woods. I didn't care where. The trees blurred. The sky pulsed. But the forest didn't fight me this time. It opened, and after what felt like miles, I found it, the second cabin, exactly like mine, but unburnt, untouched. I opened the door. Inside, fresh sheets, unused stove, a map pinned to the wall, no journal, no axe, no trace of me ever being there. I stayed inside all night, heard no sounds, no whispers, no crawling. When I woke, it was day 16. My voice was back, rough, but mine. I checked my gear, still missing my original knife, fire starter, and map. But the Polaroid was in my jacket pocket, and now there were two people in it, both of them me. I stayed in the second cabin for 2 more days. It felt safer at first. No sounds in the walls, no notes, no footprints, just silence, thick and absolute. I boiled water, chopped wood, watched the sun rise and fall like I used to back home. It felt normal, but something was wrong. Subtle at first, too subtle. The food tasted off bland, textureless, like it wasn't meant to be tasted. My journal pages were all blank. My handwriting didn't look like mine anymore, and the map pinned to the wall changed. Each morning, not the terrain, the label. The word cabin moved daily, slightly, like the place was sliding across the forest while I slept. On the third night, I dreamed of a voice I hadn't heard since I was 12. My brother's. He whispered from behind the walls of the cabin, the way he used to do when we shared a room and one of us was too scared to sleep. Don't listen, don't look, don't speak. I woke up crying, and when I checked the mirror by the stove, I saw a word scratched across my neck. Listen. I started hiking again. North, then west, then back. Every trail led back to the cabin. Not the same one. Each time I returned, something had changed. A new mark on the door. A new color on the sheets. The fireplace. Missing bricks it didn't the day before. By day 21, I stopped counting how many times I'd left. Every direction curved. Every escape bent back toward the same clearing. I set a timer on my watch and sprinted for 3 hours straight. Returned to the cabin porch 45 seconds after I left it. That night, I heard the bells again. Not mine. The ones I tied to the original cabin weeks ago. The ones I left behind. They chimed once, twice, then silence. I opened the door slowly. Fog hung just above the ground, glowing faintly in the moonlight. And in the clearing stood me, naked, soaked, head tilted, smiling. The imitation raised its hand, and from its palm dangled something small and silver. My compass, the one I'd lost on day 4. It tossed it to my feet, then pointed behind me. I turned, and there, just a few yards back, was the first cabin, rotting, caved in, still standing. I stepped inside. The air was thick, heavy with mold and dust and something elsage, like it had been abandoned for 100 years. My journal was still on the table. I opened it. This time, no words, just a sketch, rough, frantic, of a face, not mine, but familiar, and below it, written in a shaking hand, "You let it learn. Now it wants to teach." That night, I dreamed of fire. The imitation sat across the flames, wearing my skin, speaking in my brother's voice. The more you remember, the less you stay. The more you stay, the more you disappear. I woke up to blood on my pillow, not from a wound, but from my ear, like something had crawled inside. I stopped using my name, not out of some paranoid survival instinct, because it didn't feel right anymore. Like saying it aloud would summon the wrong version of me. I hadn't spoken in 2 days, not even to myself. I avoided mirrors, avoided my reflection in windows, in water, in the blade of my knife. Each night, I woke with less memory. What day it was, what month, what I did before I got here. Faces of people I loved came back in pieces distorted. My mother's eyes were now my own. My brother's voice belonged to the thing in the walls. Every photograph in my journal had melted to blank, as if the pages were rejecting the memory they once held. The forest helped. It swallowed old thoughts like a fog creeping through an unlocked door. I let it. Better than remembering wrong. On day 25, I started to forget the layout of the cabin. Not the second one, the real one, or the first one, or maybe neither were real. I walked from the kitchen to the cot and hit a wall that hadn't been there before. Later, the stove had disappeared entirely, then reappeared on the ceiling. The cabin was bending to match the mind of something that wasn't me anymore. The journal changed again. This time, the handwriting wasn't miniature. Maybe it was how I used to write in school years ago, before my hand started shaking when I gripped a pen too tight. There was just one sentence, written over and over. "You are the visitor." I turned the page. New line, one I hadn't read before. "Tonight, the door opens for you. Choose who walks out." At midnight, I heard laughter. Not evil, not deranged. Just light, familiar. My laugh, coming from outside the cabin. I looked through the window and saw the imitation standing beside the fire pit. Same clothes, same posture, stirring a pot like we were camping together, like we were friends. Then it turned and waved me out. I didn't move, not until it reached into the fire and pulled something from the coals. A photograph, unburned. I stepped out into the clearing. The fog parted for me like curtains. The imitation held out the photo. I took it. It was a picture of me standing in front of a house I didn't recognize, surrounded by people with blurred faces. At the bottom, written in blue ink, "This is the version you forgot." It stepped closer, spoke in my voice. "There are no originals left, only roles. You get to be the one who leaves, if you want, but you'll need to give me something to stay." I asked what it wanted, but I didn't speak. I just thought it, and it answered, "Your name." The imitation stood by the fire pit again. It always did, ever since the forest stopped pretending I was lost. But this time, it was holding something new. In its left hand, my hat. The one I'd dropped on day one. The brim stained with sweat, torn at the back where a branch had caught it. It shouldn't still exist. I'd burned it the night I realized I was being watched. I remembered the smell. Now here it was, like nothing ever left, like I'd never left. It tossed the hat at my feet. No expression, no voice, and then it spoke not in my voice, but something beneath it, a rasp, a second layer, like two versions of me fighting for control over a single throat. It's time. You've seen enough. Give it to me. I didn't need to ask what. My name, not the one I said at work, not the one printed on my ID. The real one, the internal name, the voice I used when I talked to myself as a kid, the one I hadn't spoken aloud in over a week, the one I couldn't even fully remember anymore, but I could feel it, still curled deep behind my teeth, still mine, still resisting. I stepped toward the fire and dropped the hat in. The imitation didn't flinch, just tilted its head again. If I stay, you go. If you stay, I rot. One of us walks. One of us stays here forever. It reached into the fire and pulled something out. A length of glass, sharpened into a blade. No handle, no protection, just jagged heat, glowing at the edge. It held it out. Write it. On yourself. That's the only way the forest accepts the version that leaves. I took it. It pulsed like it was alive in my grip. My arm shook. The inside of my left forearm was pale, empty, clean, a blank line, waiting. I pressed the edge down and carved. The first letter burned like lightning. My hand twitched. The second shook so bad, I nearly dropped the blade. By the third, I started to forget what I was spelling. Not just the shape, the meaning. By the fourth, I had to say it in my head to remember how it sounded. By the fifth, my body stopped shaking. My hand kept moving on its own. And by the time I carved the last line, the blade dissolved into ash in my palm. The imitation stepped back, smiling. I fell to my knees, clutching my arm, bleeding into the dirt. The blood wasn't red anymore. It was gray, not thick, not warm. It smelled like burnt pine needles and rusted steel. The imitation whispered one last thing before disappearing into the woods. You're almost ready to remember what you forgot. I woke up the next morning in a different cabin. Same dimensions, same stove. But the wood grain was reversed. The door faced north instead of east. The cot had no sheets, and the mirror had no reflection. Only a sentence scratched into the center. Next, the forest remembers you. I didn't sleep. I didn't move. The carved name on my arm still pulsed, not like a heartbeat, like something breathing through me. The mirror didn't reflect anything. Not the cot, not the walls, not me. Just the sentence scratched into the glass. Next, the forest remembers you. That wasn't a threat. It was a summons. When I stepped outside, the woods were wrong. The trees didn't sway. The birds didn't sing. There was no breeze, no sun, no sky, just an endless canopy of black pines stretching in every direction. The ground was soft, spongy, not moss, not dirt. It felt like old skin. The path appeared on its own, a narrow trail I didn't recognize, running behind the second cabin into a fog I hadn't seen before. Every instinct in me screamed to turn around, but I followed it because something deep inside me already knew where it went. The trail didn't take me anywhere new. It took me back to a clearing, same size, same rocks, same ring of trees, but no cabin, just a shape burned into the dirt where the foundation had once been. Black, ashy, a perfect outline of the building. Inside the outline, scattered across the ground, were fragments. My handwriting, ripped journal pages, photos, receipts, a burned piece of ID, and at the very center, a second body, curled in a fetal position, wearing my clothes, the shirt I tore on day 3, the pants I stained with pine sap on day 5, even the left boot I'd lost for a full day. I stepped closer. Its skin was cracked, pale, but when I knelt down and pulled the collar back, I saw the scar on its forearm. My name, exactly as I carved it. I fell backward, choked, and heard movement behind me. Slow footsteps, deliberate. The imitation? No, the forest. I turned, and the trees had rearranged themselves. The pines now formed a ring-thick, knotted, woven together like a rib cage. Trapped inside, me, the body, and a growing chorus of whispers. My voice, every version, laughing, sobbing, telling stories I barely remembered, whispering names of people I forgot I ever loved. And in the center of the ash, a figure rose from the dirt. Not the imitation, not me, something older. The first one, it stood slowly, no features, no eyes, no mouth, no voice, but I understood it. I knew it, because it was the reason I came here. Not to reset, not to escape. I came here to disappear, and it was offering that to me completely. The moment I stepped into the burned outline, my vision split. I saw it all. The first day, the hike, the rock on the porch, the crawling in the walls, the mirror reflection, the second cabin, the loop, the swap, the deal. Then deeper, me, weeks before sending the letter to Carl, buying gear I never used, driving the wrong way on purpose, deleting my name from every login, staring in the mirror until I forgot the shape of my face. I didn't come to find peace. I came to surrender. The imitation didn't hunt me. It waited, because I invited it. The first one stepped aside, pointed toward the trees. There, in the distance, was the trail again, visible, open, daylight burned through the mist. A way out. The forest had remembered everything. Now it was my turn to choose what to forget. I stepped forward. The burned version of me on the ground twitched once, then dissolved into ash. The whispers stopped. The trees fell silent, and the forest waited. One version of me had to stay. One could walk away. The trail was glowing, not with light, but with clarity. I could finally see where it ended. No loops, no mirrored trees, no imitations pacing the edge. Just a dirt path cutting through black pines, straight toward the sound of bird song and running water things I hadn't heard in what felt like years. But I didn't move. Not yet, because part of me still wasn't sure I deserved to leave. The imitation was gone, yes. So was the first body. But I could feel something inside the forest, watching, not hunting, not chasing, just waiting. It wasn't a predator. It was a mirror, one that had swallowed every memory I tried to forget, one that could reflect only what I refused to face. And if I stepped onto that trail now, I'd carry it with me, unless I looked down at my scar, the name I carved, my real name, letters still raw, still red, still mine. But it wasn't enough, because I hadn't given anything back. The imitation had offered me a deal. One version leaves, the other stays. The forest didn't take me. I chose it. Now I had to finish what I started. I took out the last page of the journal, the one that had followed me, rewritten itself, survived every cabin shift and burn. The one with the words, "This version survives. Sign your name." I crossed it out, wrote a new line beneath it. "This version stays." And beneath that, my name, for real this time, not carved in skin, offered in ink. I folded the page and placed it where the imitation once stood. Then I stood up and walked. The trail didn't bend, didn't trick me. It simply led. For hours, I moved forward, each step lighter than the last. The woods opened, the trees thinned, and when I stepped into full daylight, I didn't cry. I just breathed. For the first time in weeks, I knew who I was. Not a version, not a robe, not a mask worn by something else. I was me, the one that chose to remember. They found me on the service road the next morning. A couple hikers flagged down a ranger after I collapsed. I didn't tell them much, just said I got turned around, spent too long without food. They didn't question it. But when they asked my name, I hesitated. Not because I forgot it, but because I wanted to earn saying it again. Now, I live quiet. I don't talk much. I don't go into the woods. I keep the journal under my bed, still blank, except for that last page, still folded, still signed. Sometimes I hear creaking in the walls when I sleep, a soft knock at the window, a laugh that sounds almost like mine, but I don't answer, because I know who I am, and I know what I left behind in the forest. That version was tired. That version needed to rest. That version is still watching, and I let him have the cabin,